All right, welcome to this explainer. We're jumping right in today because we are going to completely shatter a massive, deeply held assumption about what it actually means to be a child. We tend to think of childhood as this fixed, biological phase of human nature. But what if it's not? What if it's entirely invented?
Okay, let's dive into this. This striking quote lays out the totally mind-bending thesis from media theorist Neil Postman. He argues that, sure, infancy is biology, but childhood? Childhood is a social artifact. In fact, if we define a child as someone in a distinct period of life who needs special nurturing and is kept totally separate from the adult world, well, that concept is actually less than 400 years old. Crazy, right?
So we are unpacking the massive historical mystery laid out in Postman's brilliant analysis, The Disappearance of Childhood. We're going to trace exactly where this idea came from, why it flourished for a few centuries, and then, terrifyingly, why it is vanishing right before our eyes today.
To really grasp just how incredibly recent this invention is, consider this number. As late as 1890, which really wasn't that long ago, only 7% of American 14 to 17-year-olds were actually enrolled in school. So what about the other 93%? They were literally working adult jobs, doing heavy manual labor from sunup to sunset.
Section 1. The Medieval Adult Child. To prove that childhood hasn't always existed, we have to travel back to the Middle Ages. Today, we usually define adulthood by an arbitrary age, right? Usually 18 or older. We live in a highly literate culture that actively shelters young people. But the medieval world? It completely lacked widespread literacy, it didn't have formal education, and most crucially, it lacked our modern concept of shame.
In the purely oral culture of the Middle Ages, your biology was the only thing determining your communication skills. Basically, by age 7, a person has a solid command of speech. And back then, since everything was spoken, once you could speak and understand what adults were saying, you instantly had access to all of the culture's secrets. You were, for all practical purposes, a full-blown adult.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how thoroughly integrated a medieval 7-year-old was into the gritty, coarse world of adults. There were no primary schools. Everyone, regardless of age, shared the exact same games, the same toys, the same fairy stories. If you look at Bruegel's famous paintings from the era, you literally see 7-year-olds in taverns, draping and working right alongside adults. There is absolutely no sheltering from sexual matters, no hiding the harsh realities of life, and quite simply no concept of a civilized child.
Section 2. The Printing Press Revolution.
So what changed? Enter the technological catalyst, what we might call a Frankenstein time machine, that completely reorganized European consciousness. In the mid-15th century, Gutenberg invents the printing press with movable type, and this thing spread like wildfire. By 1480, presses were operating in 110 towns across 6 countries. By 1515, printers in Venice had mass-produced practically every known classical Greek author. Almost overnight, this machine created an entirely new symbolic environment.
And print triggered this massive, unstoppable chain reaction. Step 1. Books suddenly lock away valuable knowledge and secrets in a complex, unnatural code, which is the alphabet. Step 2. Because of that, being able to read becomes the absolute, non-negotiable requirement to actually function as an adult. Step 3. To teach people how to read, schools have to be reinvented. And finally, Step 4. Because learning to read takes years, a brand new waiting period is born. And society decided to call that waiting period childhood.
The sheer, unyielding linearity of typography generated a massive knowledge gap. Suddenly, oral tradition just wasn't enough anymore. If you needed to negotiate a contract, or learn metallurgy, or study linguistics, adulthood was no longer just a biological given at age 7. It became a symbolic achievement. It had to be earned by mastering a really complex reading competence, and anyone who couldn't read was just left behind. Section 3. The Invention of School. So the crucial point is that the cultural reaction to this printing press revolution was the creation of a massive new institution specifically designed to bridge that knowledge gap. Crucially, the word schoolboy quickly became synonymous with the word child. Think about that. For the first time in human history, age groups were being organized around an institution. To be a child simply meant you were a person engaged in the symbolic task of learning how to read.
And categorizing humans into reading levels triggered an absolute avalanche of new cultural artifacts. Because these children were now separated into classrooms, they started developing their own distinctive clothing and their own slang. For the very first time, we see the invention of pediatrics, like Thomas Fair's 1544 book, to treat their specific ailments. We also see brand new etiquette manuals designed specifically to teach them how to behave.
Just listen to this brilliant quote from Erasmus's 1530 etiquette book. He writes, "To blow your nose on your hat or clothing is rustic. It is proper to wipe the nostrils with a handkerchief." So adults were now systematically using printed texts to induce shame. They were deliberately creating a boundary of manners that separated civilized literate adults from the unformed wild youth.
Section 4. Two Visions of Childhood. Let's move to and see how this builds into the Enlightenment. As this brand new class of humans solidified, philosophers stepped in to define exactly what a child's mind actually was. And this brings us to the ultimate philosophical showdown between two giants of the era, John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Their competing visions totally shaped the soul of this new invention. Locke, representing the Protestant view, believed the child's mind was a tabula rasa, a completely blank tablet. He saw children basically as unformed adults who needed an addition process of book learning, reason, self-control, and shame. Rousseau, on the flip side, held a romantic view. He saw the child as a pure wild plant. He argued that education should actually be a subtraction process. We need to protect the beautiful innocence of youth from a diseased, corrupt civilization.
Section 5. The Disappearance of Childhood.
But after a 400-year triumph, this historical artifact, this concept nurtured by Locke and Rousseau, is abruptly breaking down. And this brings us to the deeply sad and uncomfortable modern conclusion of Postman's thesis. The cultural forces that literally built childhood are now reversing. In a lot of ways, we are moving backward to the Middle Ages.
The specific visual markers that define childhood are evaporating right in front of us. We're seeing 12 and 13-year-olds depicted immediate with the exact same attitudes as adults. The clothing industry is completely erasing the line between adult and child dress. Even spontaneous play like hide and seek is dying out, being replaced by hyper-organized things like Little League sports that strictly mimic adult rules, adult umpires, and adult demands for performance.
But the erosion goes way deeper than just clothes and games. Check this out. Between 1950 and 1979 alone, the rate of serious crime committed by kids younger than 15 increased by 11,000%. Let that sink in. 11,000%. The behavioral boundaries between adults and children aren't just blurring, they are rapidly eroding.
Which leaves us with this final, absolutely vital question to ponder. Historically, childhood required a massive conspiracy of silence. It relied on an exclusive adult world of secrets that was maintained simply because reading was difficult. So what happens to the artifact of childhood in our modern age of electronic screens? An age where there are zero prerequisites to access information, and literally every adult secret is completely disclosed to everyone instantly. Are we witnessing the end of childhood,